All right, it's 3 o'clock on November 15th. Let's bring this meeting to order. Please put your phones on silent or vibrate. Once we get into the individual cases, applicants will have an opportunity to speak, and people from the neighborhood or concerned citizens will also have opportunities to speak. Paula, would you like to do roll?
Yes. Matt Guillory.
Here.
Jorge Charnico.
Here.
Dylan Bradway. Betsy Brunsfeder. Donna Cervantes. Tyler Holmes.
Here.
Lee Peoples.
Here.
Ben Sellers.
Here.
James Barnum.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Donna just walked in.
Thank you. In your package, you all had copies of the minutes of the October 25th meeting. Can I have a motion to approve those?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second. All in favor? Yeah. Ben. Anything opposed? Okay, the meeting minutes from October 25th are approved. No withdrawn cases, no continuance requests. Is that still the case, Michael?
Yes.
All right. Let's move into the consent docket, 1706 Northwest 16th Street.
This is a proposal to provide, first of all, an addition at the rear of the building at 1706 Northwest 16th, but also in addition, a significant amount of exterior improvements, mostly consisting of fencing, gates, screening, fences, and hardscape materials and lighting in the interior courtyard of the block that's bounded by North Gatewood, North Blackwelder, Northwest 16th, and Northwest 15th. Reviewed it against the applicable design guidelines and development standards and found it to be consistent with all applicable rules and regulations, and therefore recommended approval for you and placed it on the consent docket for your consideration.
All right, thank you. It's the consent docket, so unless there's specific questions from commission members or audience members, then I will take a motion.
I'll move for approval according to staff recommendation. Basis it meets the guidelines and the Urban Design Overlay District zoning ordinance as referenced in Section C of the staff report.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the consent docket passes. Thank you. Moving on to cases for individual consideration. There's only one this month, 911 North Chartel Avenue.
This application is to construct a 4-dwelling unit residential structure at the northwest corner of Northwest 8th and North Chartel in the Cottage District. As it is located in the Cottage District, we've reviewed this case against the standard DTD1 zoning district standards that apply in this area as opposed to the urban design regulations. The first issue to consider, laid out for you in the staff report, is the setback on the front of the property. As this is not a single family or two-family residential structure, the typical applicable setback would be to have the structure built either at the front property line or within 10 feet of the property line. The applicant has chosen to situate the building 24 feet back from the front property line on Northwest 8th Street. This essentially mimics the type of setback that would be applicable on the project if it were a single family or a two-family structure, and it is in keeping with the range of setbacks for the existing structures on the same side of the street on the same block. So essentially they've chosen to meet the standard for a 1 or 2 family structure as opposed to the 3 or 4 family structure. We feel this is an appropriate way to blend this higher density project into the neighborhood, and we feel it's appropriate, and therefore we've recommended approval to the commission of the variance that's necessary from the front yard setback standards. Secondarily, we have 2 design guidelines that are discussed in the staff report. They both deal with building materials, and there are provisions in the code to allow for various alternative types of building materials, which we've cited in the staff report. In this case, we're talking about board form concrete for the first level, garage level of the structure, and some wood accent materials at various locations around the east, south, and west elevations of the structure. These are not materials that are new to the cottage district. There are a number of homes that have been built in the cottage district that do have both board for concrete or wood accent materials, and we've recommended approval of both those material alternatives to the commission. So in conclusion, we've recommended approval of the project, and you need to have a 2 motion action here. One would be to approve the project, and the second would be to provide a recommendation of approval to the Board of Adjustment on the variance request. And that completes our presentation. Prepared to respond to any questions that the commission may have.
Thank you. Before we get into questions, I want to point out to commissioners for the record, there are handouts in front of you that have been submitted from members in the neighborhood, the Cottage District neighborhood. Dealing with this first issue before we move into the others, the setback, do we have anything that shows visually the setbacks on that side of the street?
No,
Site map or anything?
We don't have it as we would have for a single or two family, because that standard doesn't apply, so we didn't ask for that from the applicant. But it is, I mean, there are probably, I think at least 2 structures that have been built on that north side of the street in the past 2 years, and they were replacing homes that were demolished and torn down on that side of the street. And essentially those 2 new structures they're both duplexes. They were mimicking the 20 to 25 foot setback range that is prevalent among the remaining houses from the older existing structures on that side of the block.
Okay. Is the applicant here? Would you like to say anything?
Yes, I'm Teresa Coates. I'm architect, owner, developer of this project. My husband and I bought the property back in 2012 and are excited to be moving forward with some new development for the neighborhood. So I'm here to answer any questions that you have about the project.
Are there questions from the panel? Comments? How about people from the neighborhood or citizens that want to weigh in? If you could announce yourself and sign in, please.
Yes, my name is Kevin Thurman. I live across the street at 924 North Chartel. Me and my wife have been down there since 2002, before any of this started. And this is quite an eye-opening experience for me because, first of all, it's just the sheer density of this project. To put 4 units on a single-family lot, where in the past this same committee has denied another architect 3 units on the same size lot back in, I think it was 2014, 2013, the Haas brothers. I just think the density for this is just way too much, 4 units on that lot. And the setback, I kind of have a little bit of problem with that, because if the variance is granted, which a lot of variance has been granted on a lot of these houses that are being built down there. In other words, the codes are not being followed, it just gets granted a variance. I think that's going to be a problem also, because without the variance, the project will not be able to be completed as it is planned out. I do like the project. I like the parking that's all underground. It's going to be access off the alley, so there's not going to be curb cuts backing out into the arterial street of Chartel. I think that's fantastic.
And for the record, not to interrupt you, but the past unit, the past proposal that was 3 units on a similarly sized lot did not have rear alley access and was very
Yes, this is
problematic
true,
because
yes.
of, so there was a major difference between these two.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I'll give you that. The next thing I want to touch on is the landscaping. Through the codes, through Oklahoma City, we're supposed to promote the urban forest, and since I've been down there since 2002, I've spoke to y'all before about this, I quit counting at 168 trees that have been annihilated in the Cottage District to build these structures. And even now, with the development of the park across the street, 3 huge oak trees were taken out along the north side of that property to make room for a retaining wall. So the deforestation of the one neighborhood that is left down there it's almost insane how many trees are gone. I have 15 trees on my lot. So the comparison to that is, I just think the landscaping is a big deal because this property has no landscaping. And it's going to be built again to 0 property line. The east side is going to be right up against Chartel with basically a wall along there. And without, with the heat, the no shading for the property, I just don't think it's a good idea. I think that it could be scaled down a little bit. Thank you all.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from Commission?
I'd like to make a comment. I'm actually kind of surprised. I shouldn't be, but I'm surprised that they have to get a variance on the setback because the setback has been so important to maintain that range. Over the years, I didn't know that there was a caveat between multifamily and single family.
Yeah, the setback it's only for 1 and 2 families, but everything else has to be within 10 feet.
So,
I feel pretty strongly that if that was brought up to the property line or within 10 feet of the property line, it would look very strange and completely out of place.
to be clear, and correct me if I'm misunderstanding this, but the variance that they're asking for is to be more in line with what the rest of the block currently has.
The code will require this building to be at or within 10 feet of the front property line, so it would be sticking out. It would be the first residential structure that I'm aware of in Cottage District that would be built in that manner.
So paradoxically, the code actually makes it easier for them to stand out in the neighborhood and not be in compliance,
It could actually
right?
cover more of the lot by building an additional probably 10 to 12 feet at the front of the building and just adding more square footage to the project, yes.
Other questions or comments? Please.
Hi, I'm Ann Dell. I live at 925 Northwest 8th Street. We've lived there since 2014. I have an issue with no driveways and no parking for guests or tradespeople. That corner is already, there are already people parked all along on the south side of the street, even at 7 o'clock in the morning. So when you drive up from the east, to the east, to that stop sign, you can't see very well. If you look up toward 10th Street, it's hard to tell if there's any traffic coming because there's a little hill there on Chartel. And so you have to kind of pull out anyway. So it's already kind of problematic. And then if there's no place for guests or relatives or visitors or tradespeople to park, the other side of the street is going to be parked up as well. It's going to be even more of a mess for us, as far as I'm concerned. So that's my main complaint about it. I think this issue, this consideration of this case was moved up a week, and so I think there would be other people here to speak about it if it had not been moved up unexpectedly. And I don't think people got a notice about it.
I think one comment about the driveways, the ordinance, this is something you might look at as far as if you want to change the ordinance. The ordinance kind of sets you up to not have driveways, especially in the front of the house. And that's, so some of your block in particular has some driveways that are out of character with the rest of the neighborhood because there is no alley. Because the ordinance requires that you have alley access if the alley is available.
Yeah, there is an alley down on this property, though.
Right, there is an alley, and they're using the alley as alley access.
But probably no guests are going to park there.
In the alley, I
the
have
alley.
no idea.
Well, there wouldn't be.
Somebody that lives there might know. Lee?
It's illegal to park in the alley,
Oh, okay.
unfortunately. People do it, but it causes all kinds of problems.
Okay.
But the guidelines currently in the Cottage District, if you do have rear alley access, which this property does, then front driveways are not, you need to go through that rear alley. So, that's something that the code is kind of structured to be that way and do away with multiple curb cuts and be more pedestrian friendly and have all the vehicle access from the rear.
Yeah, well, I understand that. I agree with that. I wish we had an alley access on our property, but we don't. But the thing is, with a four-family unit, there's going to be a lot of people there all the time, driving up there for one reason or the other. That's my issue with it.
And they'll have to park in their garage.
It's what?
They'll have to park in their garages of all things.
I don't know. Will they have access to the garage?
Yeah, I mean, the people that live there will.
Yeah.
This is
yeah,
a very
but
creative way to get access to the garages. I've never seen anything quite like it.
Anyway, thank you.
Hey,
Ms. Coates, would you like to address that
Yes.
especially for guest parking?
Yeah, there are a couple of things that I'd like to address for some of the neighbors. One being the fact that this lot is actually zoned for single-family, multifamily, or mixed use. So we even could have put retail here, but we didn't feel that was appropriate for the neighborhood. And as we've addressed, we really want this building to really fit into the context of the neighborhood. And so that's why we chose to pull it back and line it up with the other buildings in the neighborhood. We also aren't required to even have parking either, but we chose to do two parking spots per unit for this property. So we are very mindful of the fact that putting more units on this lot does allow, the way that we've approached it allows for more parking for those units. We have our builder here, and they're very sensitive to construction and what that will entail, and they're going to do everything that they can to make sure that they address the neighbors' concerns, and potentially are going to explore the opportunity to park in some of the nearby parking garages for that time period. And then I think landscaping, very important. We don't show a lot of it on this site plan, but we are going to comply with the requirements. It's very important to us, and we want to make sure that where the building meets the ground, it's a nice place to look at. And so we are going to have appropriate landscaping for this site.
And I am sympathetic to the comment of, losing urban forest and trees like that. It is not something that this commission has any control over, whether or not people cut down trees. Within the neighborhood association, it can be encouraged as much as possible not to cut them down, or to at least remember the old expression of the best time to plant a tree is yesterday. If you're going to be cutting them down, hopefully we can be replanting new ones. Are there other citizens or members of the neighborhood that would like to speak? Please, Bill. Oh. Just sign in, please.
I'll do that. My name is Brian Dell, and I live at 925 Northwest 8th Street, too. And I would like to point out to the commission that either you all or the design committee back about a year or two ago, whenever the Halls brothers were going to build a very similar type of structure at the location of 913 and 915 on Northwest 8th Street, you did not allow, that was not allowed. What they ultimately did was something that we probably would agree with, and that is to build a single-family house on a 25-foot lot, and they did two, one on each of the halves of the lot, which is only, and they only did it 2 stories. What we're looking at here is a 3-story structure for 4 families. And quite frankly, whenever I looked at the drawing on this thing and saw how they had the parking in the thing to come in one back for all 4, what amount to about 8 cars, I was reminded 50 years ago whenever I worked as a parking lot attendant at the Park Hotel here in Oklahoma City, and I had to back all the way in. Those people are going to have to do the same thing, back out of that lot, and it would be very interesting to see. So that design has an issue for me. But the most important thing to me is that with regard to the idea that it was thought at about a year ago that a very similar type of building would not go in our block. And I believe that it would be inappropriate for one like the one designed to go into this area. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, the parking might not be conducive to large trucks. That point is taken. It's important to remember there are differences between the different lots and the different properties, even within the same neighborhood here. There are several fairly important differences, either practical differences or legal differences between this property or this proposal and the one that's been referenced a couple times that was rejected for a similar use. One being that I've already mentioned, the rear alley access. 2 being that was an interior lot in the middle of, not middle of a block, but in the interior of a block instead of on a corner, especially of a corner of Chartel is a fairly major thoroughfare. But most importantly, we can't forget that this is zoned differently. This lot is not the same zoning as the underlying zoning of that the Dawes property that was referenced. The zoning,
The use classification is the same. Yeah, it's the same.
You couldn't do commercial on Dawes property, though. In the middle of the block? Okay, we've just never had anyone propose that. All right, sorry, I misspoke. There are practical differences between those projects, though. Mr. Lavallo?
Bill Lavallo, I live at 825 Northwest 7th. I think this project would be just a major enhancement to the neighborhood. It's beautiful. It's in keeping with what's going on in the neighborhood already. And I think the density is completely appropriate. And I think that the precedence of the Lisbon Lofts on the very next block on Chartel indicates that there's never been a parking problem there.
And what development is that? The one that you're referencing?
The Lisbon Lofts on 9th?
That's the one just north of this, right?
Exactly, and that's a 4-unit, I think that's a 4-unit development. More? 6?
It's 4 or 5, and it is in
Anyway.
a different.
And, on a day-to-day basis, one is not aware that there's any excessive number of cars parked around that.
Okay. Thank you. Do we have questions or comments from the commission?
I have some comments to make. I think the attempt here to put 4 units on a lot elsewhere in the district where we would see maybe a single-family home or a duplex or a home and a garage apartment is just going too far. I believe this is in conflict with the development guidelines 7200G. It says that when we look at specific projects, we have to take into account the character and context of the urban environment. The code defines context as the placement of a project as it relates to neighboring land uses. If we look immediately next to this house, or this proposed fourplex, we have a single-family home. Across the street, across Chartel, we have a single-family home. And if you remember in May, we rejected an application to put a triplex right next to that single-family home. I think the project also has problems complying with the development guideline 7200 G4C, and that states that new development occurring next to existing and stable residential neighborhoods has to have appropriate transitions that respect the scale of adjacent uses. And next to this house, we have a very traditional home, and it is in a very stable residential neighborhood in the district. I think putting 4 units here is just way out of scale. We rejected that project across the street on the same grounds, this 7200 G4C, for putting too many units there. And I recall a comment during discussion on that, that maybe the developer had purchased land that is just not adequate or sufficient for doing this type of development, and that could be the situation here. I also have some issues with the project as it does not comply with the downtown development framework. For the Cottage District, under the DDF, it specifically rejects maximizing density as the market would allow. It only selects that option for the downtown business district, but it rejects that for the Cottage District. And in my mind, that's what they're trying to do here. Also, that downtown development framework has some key character elements for the Cottage District, and one of those is low-density residential building pattern. I think we're clearly not seeing that here. Another one of those is a compact neighborhood form, which we heard at the meeting where we adopted this, as smaller blocks with uniform lot sizes and smaller structures. And I don't see how this complies with compact neighborhood.
Hey, Lee, before you get too far in advance, can you read the exact, you said that the downtown design framework rejects. Can you read the exact words from that, please?
Yes. So the downtown development framework, and if you have that, the packet that was passed out last time, it's 4-2F, Sub-District Design Guidelines, and my page number on that is page 63, and it's a chart that has these different colors and different options there, and one of the options is maximize density as market would allow. And so for the Central Business District, that is selected, but for Cottage District, they do not select maximize. Sorry? It's not selected. It's not selected. Yeah. So for those reasons, I appreciate the project. I think it's very well. It looks very nice, but I cannot support it based on these problems.
You bring up massing and scale. It looks like this project is 37.5 feet. Is that, do we know what the neighboring property heights are, or roughly?
Well, there's a single-story house adjacent to it, which is definitely quite shorter. Yeah, you can see it. There's that gray one in the top or up in the upper left there.
Yeah, that structure is probably 14 to 16 feet tall, the peak of the gable.
How tall is the apartment building across the street? Do we know?
Well, it's seen here in the upper left. I would estimate that's probably around 20 to 22 feet tall.
Yeah, and the proposed, I don't know if you said this or not, Mr. Chairman, but this project is 37 feet, 6 inches, if I'm looking at the correct drawing.
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to look at the drawings. If there's a, it looks like that 37 foot 6 inch mark is on the east side of the property. I can't quite tell from these drawings if there is a difference between that and the west side, if there's a slope or a grade to the property.
No, it's 37.6 all the way around.
Okay.
I mean, the property is sloping from north to south,
Yeah.
sloping down, so, but the 37'6" is from the finished floor.
Yeah. And then the property slopes down to Chartel, another.
There's a, I don't know, about a 4 to 6 foot slope at the very front of the property. And then Chartel, of course, is sloping down all the way along the side of the street.
Other questions or comments from commissioners?
I guess I want to make a comment. I was the one at that previous meeting that mentioned that previous project did not seem feasible or correct for the lot. There's differences between that lot as well. It was half the size, and the primary access for 2 of the garages were coming off of, I believe, Chartel. Access and that scale of that lot was a little bit off to me. I like the materials of this. I like the way it looks and feels on this lot. And the creativeness when it comes to how it's accessed is a huge plus. I think that was the primary thing of having 2 curb cuts off of Chartel. But that's going back to that comment and addressing that.
My only comment would be that we're really not looking at the uses as far as the zoning goes. Those are allowed uses. What you'll have to do is look at your remaining guidelines to see the compatibility of those type of things. But we're not getting into, I mean, it's properly zoned that way, so we can't say that you can't have a multifamily unit there.
Oh, and I was just, it is a guideline, so it's not,
Right.
it's not going to zoning. I was just pointing out that it doesn't choose that
To
option.
clarify that.
So I'd like to address the massing and the scale of this building. I think that with the exception of the fact that there's really not any glass except for slits of glass in the doors, I really like the fact that there is a lot of glass on the second and third floor, a lot of variation to bring the scale down to a human scale. The fact that the materials are varied along the elevation really make it more tactile. So there are a lot of things that I really like about this particular project and the way it looks.
And I did want to note too, just in regard to what we were talking about in regard to height, that we are in keeping with the guidelines that were provided to us, and that was 3 stories or 50 feet for that area. So we wanted to, utilize the opportunity that we had to kind of break up those facades and make it feel less dense, break it up vertically, break it up horizontally, to really make it feel more appropriate for that site. I also wanted to address one of the neighbors' comments about parking, and my husband and I don't actually own a vehicle, but we did rent the largest truck we could find and actually marked off in a parking lot those dimensions for the parking to make sure that the owners of those spaces could actually back out of their garages and pull out of the parking space forward. We didn't want to require anyone to have to back all the way out of that garage. So I did want to note that as well.
Thank you. Are there other questions or comments? If not, I am open to a motion.
I would like to submit a motion to approve the application on the basis that the project meets the regulations and guidelines of the Downtown Design District zoning ordinance as referenced in section C and D of the staff report, with the condition that the applicant shall abstain approval of a variance from the Board of Adjustment for the maximum of 10 feet front yard setback requirement.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed?
We have one in opposition, Lee Peoples, and the motion carries. Proposal is approved. And the recommendation to the BOA is to approve the setback change.
Need a motion.
Oh, you do. Sorry. Do I have a motion for the approval, the recommendation to the BOA?
Recommend approval of the variance from the maximum 10-foot front yard setback requirement.
Do I have a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries unanimously. Thank you. All right. Moving on to other business. We have a calendar of 2018 meetings.
This item was on your agenda at the September meeting, and we were going through it and verified that the one that you received at that meeting had a couple of typographical errors in it, and so we're just bringing this back to correct those errors. There was a couple of 2017 dates instead of 2018 dates. So.
Do we need to vote on it again? Move approval.
Real quickly, I really didn't get a chance to look at, and I just didn't think about looking up these dates. How close is that November date to Thanksgiving? Is that the week prior?
Yes, we moved it up for next year, just as we did this year, only we did not shoot ourselves in the foot. And
that's the only reason I asked, because it came up in today's meeting.
We did also move up the deadline for that meeting, as well as the moved up deadline for the December meeting as well.
Okay, perfect. Motion?
Yeah, I made it.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, put them in your calendar. Communications?
Happy Thanksgiving.
Anything stand out from the administrative approval report? No, these are actually all three signs, up, and they all happen to be, it looks like on 23rd or one up on Northwest 25th. So,
Any other planning department staff announcements or comments?
no.
Commissioner comments? All right, our next meeting has been pushed to December 20th. Thank you. We are adjourned.
Is the pen yours?